Welcome to Positive Disintegration, a path to authenticity. This episode is the second episode of a two-part conversation. And Chris and I are again talking to Autum Romano about polyvagal theory and how our nervous system plays a part in our development and relationships. We delve into personal examples of polyvagal theory, neuroception and sensitivity to the states of others, PDA, creating cues of safety, and top-down and bottom-up ways to help us regulate our nervous systems. Hello, lovely listeners. This is the second part of our conversation with Autum Romano on polyvagal theory. At the end of the last episode, Autum was talking about polyvagal theory informing how we interact in relationships, particularly during arguments or disagreements. This episode picks up the thread of the conversation, and Chris brings up the topic of picking up the energy of others.
That's a great point. And it actually is leading me to bring up something that I feel like is connected here. There's actually so I feel like I'm at a fork of the road, and in one direction, I want to ask this question of personal energy. And then the other road is don't let me forget about PDA in this conversation. But I think these things are connected because one thing that I've learned in adulthood and that I've really been paying attention to in recent years is just how much I can detect people's energy, how much it impacts me, and how careful I have to be about my connections with people virtually or in person because I'm very sensitive to energy. I feel it really strongly. And I realize now how much that impacts my interactions with people, and it impacts my emotional regulation. I didn't realize that when I was young. And if someone who's very upset sits down next to me, and before I was aware of this, I might start thinking that I was really anxious or there was something really wrong with me because I'm picking up on their energy. And now that I know this, I'm shields up on this. But it's the kind of thing, if you don't know that you need to do that, it dysregulates you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, neuroception is, detection without awareness. This is how the body is picking up cues of threat or cues of safety. And so, if another person's body is in a protection mode, your body is going to neurocept that. And I think that we're still learning about the kind of the neurodivergence of that, right? So we know okay, so autistic folks have greater neuroception, okay? And it's not always the same for all people. But and then like you said, Chris, you know that you have a wide neuroceptive field. I also have a wide neuroceptive field. Now, sometimes there's certain things that, for me, I know I'm very acoustically sensitive. So, I mean, it's one of the ways that I can know if I'm kind of more. I think of those general dysregulations versus the acute. So say you kind of wake up and your nervous system isn't as resilient that day as another day. Like for me, I'll have they call it hyperacusis, just some sound sensitivities. So that's one of the ways I know, oh wow, you're struggling a little bit more because it's, of course, my poor husband, it's always him. It's always oh, he's got the spoon again with the bowl. It's the way that he scrapes bowls with his spoons will get to me. But say I have to go to the store. If I bring my noise canceling headphones and I'm listening to music that really helps support my nervous system, I can change my neuroceptive field a bunch just by being in control of my sound environment, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. I've never done that at the store, but I can say that at home, I pretty much live in headphones.
Yeah.
If I'm in my office or just working or if I'm not engaging with somebody else. I mean, I don't wear them if I'm around my husband or my son, but
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I do.
It's really interesting. There's so many things. I mean, right, I think I mentioned the sensory environment, our sensory integration system is totally dependent. It is the foundation of how our sensory integration system in our brain works is built on what our autonomic nervous system is doing. So if your body is in connection mode, your sensory integration system is going to work better. It will filter out more of your sensory environment. So if your body is already in protection mode, it will filter out less of the sensory environment. So, our ears function differently, whether we're in connection mode or protection mode. And so being able to influence our neuroceptive field just a tiny bit is really powerful. And being aware of that. And we were both talking about preparing for our interview today. And so sometimes it's like a simple meditation, but really it's not necessarily meditation, it's mindfulness, right? That be for someone that might be just being in the shower. So like a shower is one of the ways to help shift our autonomic nervous system state. Or for someone else, it could be like they're listening to their favorite song. Or for someone else, it could be sitting in their favorite chair and looking out the window or reading a book or whatever. So there's different ways that we can kind of singularly understand ourselves before we come into a relational experience with another person. And so then we can start to understand how we're impacted.
That's a really good point. Because, Chris, when you were talking about like you are very sensitive to other people's emotional states, I'm also thinking to myself, yeah, and you're also very intense too. And I often think that about myself. It's like I'm sensitive to other people's states, but I'm like, if I've got emotional overexcitability, my emotions feel really loud to me. Like I know for a fact from feedback from other people, they are loud to everybody else as well. Right? I'm shouting at 1,000 decibel emotionally at people. And so also I think it's not about just being conscious of your own sensitivity to other people's emotional states, but also saying, if I'm like hearing everything on that frequency, perhaps I'm also projecting that frequency as well. And so I had to do a lot of work at getting out of my own headspace and going, oh, I'm sensitive to this and other people are impacting me this way. Going, hey, hang on, have you thought about the other people around you too and how you're impacting them? And again, it comes back to that focusing on the relationship part of it. And when you get more into that space of how am I making the other person feel as well, it does something to you. And I think it's because you're trying to force yourself into that green space where everything just becomes a lot easier all of a sudden because you've gone into that, again, into that curiosity space. You forced yourself there.
But don't you realize that what you're describing right now is overexcitabilities then operating as dynamisms and taking you to where you need to be? And this is what he meant when he said that, like, overexcitabilities are this intensity. It's the tragic gift. Like, it's interesting because there's been so many things about the theory that have been going through my head while we've been talking about this. And one of them is kind of overcoming this like propensity we have to react in one way and learning how to manage that and live in harmony internally and like bring it under control. I mean, this is like the whole thrust of the theory and moving into a multi-level state, which is like in connection. Emotional overexcitability is tied to relationships. And it's absolutely what we've been talking about, like the power of connection. It literally is powerful. Like you said, Autumn, I mean, it has an impact on your health, on your well-being to be in connection. This is an undeniable, obvious fact.
Yeah.
And so, learning how to move into connection is huge. But if you don't have safe people in your environment to connect with, it can feel like torture. And that's the problem,
That's so,
it's
so sad, but you cannot, like, you can't just do this by yourself. It's not like you have faulty wiring. Right? And
That's right.
if you think about a kid, right? Like, thank God, Chris, you had people that you could rage against that could hold that for you. Right?
Oh, totally. But those are the people who, so years later, I mean, in our episode on autoethnography, I'm sure I talked about this, that 11 years ago now, when I was first exploring my past as a researcher and like interviewing people who knew me when I was young, it's exactly what you said, Emma. They were like, you're so intense. And like for the first time in my life, I woke up to the fact that I was intense and I was like 40, and which is hilarious. I remember this one teacher was like, listen, you are intense. He was like, when you were a kid, you were so intense. He's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, like you were a 10. I was unaware of, how different that was. And so like discovering the theory, and when I saw this book, Living with Intensity, I laughed and I was like, like who knew there was like a manual about this? You have to learn how to be in relationships. So a lot of the work with Michael, when I talk about Michael as a mentor, you're wrong if you think it's just about intellectual work and like studying the
Right.
theory. So much of it has been the relationship and like
Mhm.
learning how to be a person with him, because he's so safe that I could
Mm.
like work through all these dynamisms with him. It's amazing. He really can like tolerate me without making me feel bad about it too. Whereas
Yes.
everybody else, nobody meant to be like, you're too much, Chris, but they couldn't handle me. And that's what they said time and time again. They couldn't cope with me. Michael has been able to cope with me, and my
Right.
husband too. Like there are a few people in the world who can, but it's
Well,
a
and
lot. And this
that
is what overexcitability is all about. And that's why people misunderstand it. I think that there are levels of overexcitability, not only developmentally where they're impacting you differently, but of different degrees of intensity. Like I know I'm extremely intense, and part of it is my profound giftedness and like my intellect. And it's really hard to be this way. I mean, I realize that I really like intimidate people. This is like a tragic gift to be this way and also be like
Mhm.
unapproachable in some ways. Like, now that I have a safe nervous system, it's much better for people to try
Right.
and be close to me.
Well, but I'm guessing that that is the less tragic part of the current gift, that, you can hold that capacity. I'm guessing when you're at camp with the kids too, is that you're not easily dysregulated by any intensity.
It's changed my life to be able to be the way I am now. And I'm still
Well,
growing. Like I'm
well,
not where it's not
yeah,
like I've reached some end point. Like I'm
no.
constantly learning better ways to operate my body and live in it. And I realize now that part of my personal challenge in life has been to live in my body and live in the present moment. My whole life until like the past 10 years, I wasn't living in my body or like in the moment. I was
Mm,
living in another world in my head. And like
mhm.
now I live in the moment.
It's so
It's
beautiful,
amazing.
right? And that kind of integration is God. I mean, to me, it's like that's what we're here to do.
Yes,
Is
definitely.
to build moments of integration. And it's interesting. So when you were talking about this kind of intensity, when okay, this is I studied the neurobiology of shame, and we talked about how for children, when they have a caregiver that gets dysregulated by their emotions, that that is the birthplace of shame in that child's body. So as we grow and learn to understand ourselves, it's a really big deal that we can build capacity and resilience to hold space for people who are that maybe maybe they're generally intense or they're having moments of intensity, and to be able to hold that for them and be okay. So it's an interesting thing, right? So I think for me, I think about this difference between, is it a threat or not, right? Because especially if you think about children, if a child is having a big response, because, maybe because of OEs, can we just let that happen without that saying anything about us? Right. So a lot of times in a caregiver situation, if you have a child that is having big behavior and that's not understood, even, yeah, let's say this is a good segue into PDA. So it's like if you have a kiddo that fits a PDA profile, and they're just, they're not wanting, they're not able to meet any demands placed on them. And they're like, no, 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 no. Say you're out in public, and the kid is like, no. You can have that caregiver or that parent, whatever, be like sort of triggered by that and then respond to that. And if we're going to think about neuroception, if they become dysregulated, then that is, that child is only going to be getting more, cues of threat. They're getting it from the environment. Now they're getting it from their caregiver. So if you're able to stay regulated and rooted, but hold that for someone, but not let it upend your sense of safety, that is, I'm guessing, what is the dynamisms. I mean, when you're talking, Chris, about you and Michael, that's what's happening when we're talking about two adults. But it is that dynamic between two people. And so when we're able to move into that place where we can hold that for another person that's having, an intense experience, and let that not dysregulate us. So we're not just throwing, we're not increasing this neuroceptive field of threat, then it changes everything for the other person, for us too, but for the other person who's struggling.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because when you think about it, like the neurological exam was part of Dabrowski's method. He was like assessing developmental level that way. He could do his neurological exam and tell you where someone was, like developmentally, based on what he was observing in their exam. When you think about that, like when I meet somebody, I can tell a lot about where they are developmentally by their nervous system and how they are able to connect with me. And so if I find I can't connect with someone energetically, it's usually because there's something keeping us from being able to connect authentically. I realize now that part of what I consider authenticity is like an emotional honesty and an ability to like be in the moment and face reality. But not everybody can do that.
Right, that's that integration you're talking about.
So PDA, I was at the PDA North America conference earlier this month, and I was so happy to see how much they were talking about the nervous system in sessions that I was in and in like discussion sessions too. It was an interesting format. One day it was more like presentations, and then the next day was discussions around topics. And it wasn't a lot of new information for me, but so PDA, pathological demand avoidance, we haven't really talked about it on the podcast yet, but I identify as a PDAer. This is something that I've figured out. I personally prefer pervasive drive for autonomy, but the things that we've been talking about, these things are all connected for me. Like my very sensitive nervous system is a part of being a PDAer. At least that's how it seems to me. Even being at that conference, it was so interesting to be around a bunch of other people who identify as PDAers because they're intense. We all have this intensity. Autumn is so interesting to me because like your family is a family that I know resonates with PDA.
Yeah, definitely can't speak as an expert on this, but, I've been thinking about it for a few years. And my current thoughts on PDA is that it's a very precise balance of how there's a different neuroceptive field. I think that those bodies are even more than is typical tuned to cues of threat or danger from the environment. And so that might be sensory, that might be people. A lot of times we think about people's energy as being the big thing that we notice, but we don't know how much of it is sensory until we start being able to change or control or impact our sensory environment. So, it can be sounds, it could be temperature, it can be light. All of that is sensory information that might be overloading the nervous system, and then it comes out as behavior. But what I'm sort of guessing is that, some of it can be more anatomical. For instance, with autism, there's just more neuronal development, right? Autistic neurons, this is part of the intense world theory. I can't remember the name now of the researcher, but right, tells us that autistic neurons respond more to input. So just that, right? That will change your neuroceptive field. But I do think that what we're noticing with someone who has PDA tendencies is that I think when you say like a persistent demand for autonomy, I want to come up with a, clever way to say that we need to really prioritize cues of safety because we're so focused on behavior. But if we focus on really prioritizing cues of safety specific to each body, I'm guessing that that body that has a tendency for PDA will have a little bit more flexibility and resilience if we're prioritizing cues of safety.
Yeah, I'm thinking about PDA from I'm just looking at the page now because I have notes because I'm actually going to be starting a PDA podcast with Marty Camersell. We're calling it
Yay.
PDA Resistance and Resilience.
Mm.
And so I'm looking at the notes that she made because Marty knows so much more about PDA than I do,
Mm-hmm.
even though I've known for a while that I'm a PDAer since discovering it. It's another one of those things like non-binary where when I learned about it, I was like, oh, yes, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
But so PDAers experience a lack of autonomy in everyday perceived demands as inherently debilitating, in their lives. So, that's me. It's debilitating for me to not have autonomy in situations. Like school was debilitating for me. I could not operate like a normal student and just do what I was told in class. And I realized now that my giftedness really helped me navigate school because they just let me read or write or whatever. I was very intellectual. So I was pretty easy to deal with. It was here's a computer, program it all day, fine. And so they just accommodated me intellectually. And so I didn't really have real issues in school. I didn't want to be there necessarily. I didn't have a lot of friends when I was young until I was in middle school. So another thing is that PDAers, they're pretty adept socially. They use it to their advantage in order to cope with this debilitating issue. It's hard to explain, but for me, I was really social. Once I figured it out, but part of figuring out being social for me was being a real wise ass and class clown. I had to really betray myself in order to be friends with other kids when I was young because intellectually I was so advanced. I just was in another world and I was living in my mind. I always wondered well, God, why am I so different and why am I struggling so much? And then I'm oh, well, I'm gifted and PDA. And now I realize that I identify as ADHD. How did I not know I was autistic until I was 50?
But okay, when you're talking about, how the struggle is a little bit different as you start to come into yourself in middle school, we're talking about autonomy and sovereignty. I still feel like it fits with this theory that I have is it's about prioritizing safety. And maybe safety isn't the right word, but if we're just going to use polyvagal terms, it's still what works for you, right? So anytime you have a PDAer who gets to be, they just get to be in charge more, right? They have autonomy because what they're going to do is they're going to prioritize whatever is easier for their body. And that's always going to be safety and connection. I'm guessing if you researched people and went down to it, that's what would be at the bottom.
Well, and this is the perfect example. So what did I do? I would forge connections with these trusted adults that I had. I would have teachers that I connected with and I would end up having lunch with them. In my senior year of high school, I seriously had lunch every day with this teacher. He wasn't even my teacher. It's hilarious. He was the city's drug prevention coordinator. But I was the president of Students Against Drugs while also kind of drugs were my special interest. And so I liked to get high and I was full of contradictions like that. But
But you were doing research.
I was always doing research and I always had adults who I could be in a relationship with, who I felt they cared about me and I cared about them. And those relationships were life-saving to me. I cannot emphasize enough how in high school, the vice principal, I would go to his office and hang out with him. And he was hello. He loved to talk to me. And so I interviewed him too, during the autoethnography. And it was fascinating to hear what these people said about me. Yeah, they just knew what to do, but they also found it overwhelming and a burden, some of them. The pressure of that was a lot. But this is the PDA thing too. You can tell from the parents at the conference, how intense it is to be the parent of a PDAer. And I did my dissertation on parenting stress in Twice Exceptional Kids. So I know that that's true that, if you have a kid that has these differences, it's more stressful because you don't have mirroring from other parents and you're looking at other children and you're what am I doing wrong? This has got to be something I'm doing. And it's until you understand this nervous system difference, it's hard to make progress.
Right. And that's honestly sometimes when I'll work with parents in like a coaching capacity on this. And honestly, if the kiddos have PDA profiles, we talk about, like kind of what I just said. You prioritize the cues of safety and you really try and minimize the threat. And honestly, I think you kind of wait for them to get older because so much of the variable that needs to change is autonomy. So it's like, okay, give them as much autonomy as sort of possible. And then you wait until more autonomy is available because they age. And we know that, developmentally, kids can have these, or people, right, can have these explosions of growth. So, say you have a PDA kid who just hasn't had the opportunity to make really great relationships with a peer. And so, the peers are teachers, right? So that's maybe an intellectual peer, but not a age peer. And then at one point, somehow there's enough autonomy or just the world kind of catches up, you become older, that all of a sudden you now have the availability to have a relationship with someone, your capacity for learning what that looks like and what is like a good, healthy relationship skills will expand exponentially during maybe, a few months or a year when that opportunity is finally given. So I think, the most important thing when I think of with PDA profiles, especially kids, is just really focusing on, learning that specific nervous system and doing everything you can in your power to take care of it. Knowing that that is the best way forward, you have to tend to that individual nervous system if your goal is like greater well-being. Trying to force them into something, it just won't work. And I think that's true for everybody. It's just undeniable with a PDA profile.
Part of the reason why I went to adults when I was a kid in school, like those relationships, part of what made them so life-saving for me is that, like, even though there were other kids I liked at school, like I learned to have age peer relationships, but like the adult relationships were the ones that like had the emotional depth that I needed. Like I realize now that I have like a need for emotional depth that other children couldn't provide. And so unless I could find adults who could connect with me that way, when I was a child, I needed that. It was like air to me. And when I didn't have it, I suffered. And like, this is something we don't acknowledge about gifted children because not all intellectually gifted kids need that, but I did. And this is a difference of like profound giftedness that is like torture when kids don't get to have it and need it.
Well, but it's interesting because, do you see the through line to our earlier conversation is that it's still relationship.
Yes, that's right.
Right? Just a unique relationship. And why not? Why not it be the staff? We talk about that as being so surprising because it's surprising in a school setting. It's not, don't you have friends that are, look at Michael, like, hello, right? I have friend mentorships that are different ages, right? That's the funny thing about school. It doesn't make any sense. And that you're like, oh, hey, guess what? The people who you can totally relate with are the people who are the exact age as you. That doesn't.
When I was 18, one of my closest friends was a 51-year-old man, which is hilarious to me because I'm like, I am 51 right now. And he seemed so old to me, but I loved him. He was such a great guy.
Well, it doesn't make any sense that we can only relate to people who are our exact age. That is the school. So it is not weird that you connected with all those people. It's the most natural thing in the world, I think, personally.
Well, right. I think that now. But it was a source of shame. And what was wrong with me when I was a kid? It was like I couldn't make the right connections with kids my age. And so I had to find adults to hang out with. It was like, it's a weird thing.
It's one of the things that schools get wrong.
It is. Well, it's just, I wish that I had known those things about myself when I was young.
The funny thing about me is my childhood experience was almost the opposite of Chris's. Insofar as, I guess, due to circumstance or whatever, my my fear or my lack of safety came from what happens when I said no to things. Fear of fiery damnation and going to hell, fear of corporal punishment, fear of being abandoned by people kept me in a space where all I wanted to do was make other people happy. But it kind of led to some of the same behaviors because I used to seek out adults as friends because they were the ones that set the rules. They were the ones that I had to please the most. And I understood that. So ironically, if Chris and I had met when we were kids, we probably wouldn't have been friends because I would have been looking and going, how can you not want to make them happy? How can you not want to follow the rules? Because that's how you avoid getting in serious fucking trouble, and the dire consequences coming on your head. It's almost like we've got very different perspectives on that, but it resulted in some of the same, having to seek out different relationships. And it also brings me back to this place of whatever your kid is doing, you have to figure out where their safety cues are coming from, because my lack of safety wasn't from being told what to do or having my autonomy taken away. My lack of safety was from the consequences of what happened if I didn't. So I think you've got to figure out, if someone had said to me, it's okay to fail, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to say no sometimes, that would have led to vastly different life experiences for me, because that mentality of having to be a people pleaser also gets you into a shit ton of trouble down the track.
Well, that's where the part where my father was drinking all the time definitely comes into play. My parents were kind of counterculture, young, my father was 16 when I was born. So yeah, totally different. It's true. Very different experiences. But listening to you, Emma, I'm thinking to myself, I would have tried to turn you, and get you to that's what I would have done. I would have been like, hey,
yeah.
Emma.
And I actually had that experience with my step siblings. And then I ended up getting in trouble for it. So it just taught me that I can't be friends with other kids because they're going to lead me down a path that's going to get my ass smacked.
Wow.
That can be explained, Emma, with polyvagal theory. That's like fawning. So it's interesting. Fawning is typically it's how the social engagement system is accessed when the body is under threat. So it's that's more of that sort of dorsal response, but then you're able to use the social engagement system to create some stability and safety. So that's by you saying oh, what do they need me to be? I'll do that. So it's interesting. The people pleasing can be explained through this, little window of polyvagal theory by fawning.
Interesting. And also important, because I think when you react in other ways, you put up a fight or you freeze or you run away, the other person's going to go, hey, what the fuck's going on? But when you are trying to please them, they're like, oh, well, I'm happy.
Yeah.
They probably aren't even conscious of the fact that this is actually a bad response from you.
It's an interesting skill. Dr. Porges, author of Polyvagal Theory, he talks of it as an adaptive response, that, few people are able to fawn, and that it's not a choice. It's an adaptive survival strategy. So sometimes if I'm talking to people and we're trying to figure out if they fawn or not, I'll say, okay, you're at a convenience store and it's all of a sudden becomes an active shooter. Somebody comes in to rob the place. Who are you? Are you the person that hides? Are you the person that fights them? Or are you the person that starts talking to them to, calm them? So what do you guys think? What's your answer?
I think I'm trying to talk to them. It's a good question.
Do you know what you would do, Emma?
I would probably hide. I'm not going to risk antagonizing them by saying the wrong thing. So I'm going to hide.
If you knew the shooter, would you talk to them?
Probably, yes.
That's interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I think I would talk to the shooter. I'd be like, hey, how can I help you?
Yeah, exactly.
I would put on my best.
Feel like I would do my best to try to connect with them.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a tricky question, too, because some of that is a learned adaptation and some of it, I think, is a natural, instinctive
I think
response.
The underlying reason, though, is telling. I don't want to talk to them because if I say the wrong thing, I'll make them angry and make it worse. I don't want to stuff this up. When we're talking about creating those, cues of safety and doing the regulation, this is probably going down the esoteric energy path a little bit, but I noticed that safe and sound protocol was actually around listening to sound and trying to, as you said, like, going for a walk, taking a shower, listening to music, trying to regulate ourselves. So I just wondered if you had any further thoughts on that, because obviously it's not always possible to get other people to create cues of safety for us outside of, that curiosity and having those put the coffee mug aside conversations and trying to foster that. But that's not always possible. So like what can we do for ourselves to notice when we're going into those states to try and help regulate ourselves so we can make better behavioral decisions?
Yeah, that's great. I think that sometimes it's a lifelong understanding. So like for me, one of my simple things will be move my body. So I was a super active kid. Like some of my favorite things I remember when I was little was I loved to climb trees and I like to ride my bike. So it still holds true. So any kind of movement for me will be really good when I can think about that as preventative. If I just have a regular routine of working out or hiking or whatever, that is always going to make things better for me. And again, if I have even like as I was prepping for this, I did like, a still meditation, but I also just did a lot of like stretching just because, I don't know, that's a really important thing for me. Oh, and I took a nap. So like for me, like sleep, if I'm tired, that's it. Like it is like the biggest physiological Achilles heel for me. I just I can't grab those like runaway trains if I'm tired. Sleep is really big for me and, movement. So I think about like body things first, anything we can do to help support our sensory environment. So even if we start about it in a super basic way, having comfortable clothes, right? This sounds small, but it's a big deal. So if you're just like, if you know that a certain day is going to be hard, make sure that you are wearing anything that is going to best support you in that day. So it won't, when I say comfortable, that might not be like cozy comfortable. If maybe you have like imposter syndrome stuff and you really need to feel confident, then you wear like the boss lady suit, because you're like, oh yeah, I feel like super smart when I wear that, right? So sometimes I always start with the body though. A lot of times we talk about top-down interventions versus bottom-up. So top-down is using the mind to calm the body. Bottom-up is using the body to calm the mind. So the top-down stuff always, those are great. We just know more about them, right? So like, journaling or prayers or meditation or affirmations. I think more of the bottom-up stuff. So yeah, making sure you're rested, making sure you have the right food and in the right times. I mean, some people do better with high protein. Some people do better with, high fat. Some people are more sensitive to foods that are inflammatory. I mean, sugar's really not good for anybody, but some people are just more sensitive to it than others, right? Some people, it is their kryptonite. So I just think starting with the body, the basics, eat, sleep, poop, like anything that we can do to make sure our digestive systems are working, we have enough water, we have good food, we have good rest, that we're moving our bodies. Those are the first things that I think about. You mentioned the safe and sound protocol. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic auditory intervention that was created by Dr. Porges, and he created it in his lab. So it is different than just music, but also just music is great. So I'll tell people to like create playlists for themselves and then use it for certain things. Like if you have a more dorsal tendency and you need to really try and stay engaged and lean on that like sympathetic fight or flight, make yourself like a angry playlist, like your Rocky soundtrack, right? And like listen to it before you have to go into some conflict situation. Say you're like getting divorced and you have to go into mediation and you have a tendency to collapse. man, listen to something that makes you feel like a badass before you go, right? Or if you're a hothead, maybe you're listening to some Brahms lullaby before you go in. So I do think that, music is a wonderful, wonderful way. The Safe and Sound protocol is different because it's, like I said, created by Dr. Porges. In his lab, it strengthens the middle ear muscle, the stapedius muscle, and it helps bring in the sound of the human voice and deflect those low frequency sounds, which are sounds of danger. It's an acoustic vagal stimulator, so it does increase the vagus's capacity to work well, but it's like an actual workout for the auditory system and the nervous system. So some vagal stimulators are only sort of helping support the vagus while you're listening to it. SSP is different because your middle ear muscle will be stronger after you've completed the 5-hour protocol. So, I mean, I'm a huge believer in SSP. I've been a provider for 6 years, and that was one of the things I did to prepare for our interview today, was I listened to an hour of SSP today. So, there are things out there, SSP that typically works for everyone if it's delivered in the just right way. If that's not it, sometimes supplements. I think that, if you're listening and you're struggling, just keep trying, right? Sometimes I remember when my family was really struggling, it was so hard. God, it was so hard to keep looking, right? When you're treading water and you're like spending some time under the water surface, but you have to keep searching because you'll eventually find something that will give you a little bit of ground, right? And then when you have more ground to stand on, you get to just keep strengthening and supporting the nervous system. I mean, we'll all continue to struggle always, but when we have more resilience and we have a deeper understanding of how we work, then we have more tools to help us. One of the biggest things that I try to help people understand when they're really learning about their nervous system is that it is the most natural thing in the world to think, oh, I'm going to prevent dysregulation. Well, we can't, unfortunately, because again, neuroception is detection without awareness. We don't know. Our body moves into a protection space before we have an opinion about it. So the best thing that we could do is know we're there. Just like Chris was saying, when they know that they're mad, they're like, ooh, maybe be careful about what you're going to say next, So it's really important for us to know what our own dysregulation looks like. And if we're raising kids, to help them understand that and then know what helps support them from there, right? Some people, it's best to hug them or talk to them right then. Some people need a break. So, being curious and learning, and then I think always studying is good, but also just being perceptive and curious about the body. I mean, I've said it so many times during this conversation, our bodies are really smart. And yes, it's good to learn from information from other environments, but really, if we're just studying that, either ourselves or the person we're caring for, we'll learn if we just study them. And they're giving us information all the time. So I think that's my long-winded answer, is to get to know ourselves better, or the people we're caring for.
I am loving this because you're helping me make so many connections that I'm like having a hard time holding them all.
Well, I'm just going to jump in and say real quick that top down, bottom up is honestly the best thing, because sometimes you're not in a headspace to top down, like to start with the head. If I'm in that space of I can't meditate, I can't journal, I can't focus on shit, I'll set my massage chair. I'll play solfeggio frequencies, or I'll pace and I'll listen to death metal. Or, sometimes you need to go for a walk down to the beach, or have some fucking Doritos, whatever it is, have a nap, have a shower. And then you're in enough of a better space. I even have a cry. You're in enough of a better space that can, now I can get my journal out. Now I can do the thing, because you'll never, I don't think you'll ever fix any underlying issues if you don't do the top-down thing. And that will, in the long term, help you regulate your system, because you've now changed your perspectives on stuff. So you don't see as much threat in the world, whatever it is. But you can't have one without the other. You need the bottom-up stuff as well to get that immediate regulation and to be able to put you in a space where you can then do the other stuff as well.
Well, because that's your capital S best self. I mean, the thing is, in polyvagal world, we say story follows state. Your mind will tell you a lot, but if you move into the mind space, that top down, when you're in that protective mode, you're just going to hear those old stories that aren't super helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Your mind's going to give you bullshit.
Your wise. So you're trying to get to your wise best self. And so the body, you always start with body first, right? Like drink a glass of water, jump up and down 10 times. You know what I mean? It's the body. You're trying to get to your wise self. And so we always have to start with the body.
You were leading toward one of the paths that was in my mind, which was we have to be careful in our self-talk and like what we're playing in our heads, because that has such an impact on our nervous system too. And so,
oh my God, yes.
I think that one of the other most important things I figured out in middle age is to be careful in that way and to not like be violent toward myself internally.
Yep. Yeah, I do not listen to my very tired self. It is like, it's the saddest. She has the saddest stories. So when she gets really tired and she gets the microphone, I'm like, oh, honey, I'll talk to you in the morning. And I just like tuck her in. I will not engage with her. I will not. It goes nowhere, you know? It's only harmful, honestly. So yeah, she's like the drunk friend you don't answer the phone call. I'm like, oh, no, not today. Not talking to you. So it's really good to acknowledge, but be kind, right? The compassion, there's a difference, right? This is kind of like, you know, IFS stuff, your parts. It's like to understand that part, but be like, okay, you don't get to actually drive us around right now. But like, all right, I see you. I'm taking care of you. But to maybe not engage with it.
Right.
Well, like engage, but not like, oh, you get to make all the choices right now. Like for me, if I know if that really tired voice comes in, I'm like, oh, wow, you're really tired. Okay. You know, maybe I'll get myself a soft blanket, cup of tea, be like, I'll talk to you about this in the morning. And then, yeah, when I unpack it after I've slept well, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is fine. This is not an like earth shattering emergency. You know, it is a concern that we'll keep with us, but this is not a disaster. It will feel like a disaster the night before. But if I've rested, it's okay.
I was just telling Michael yesterday that it's been 8 years this week coming up since I visited him for the first time here in Wisconsin. And like on those early trips, I didn't do a very good job of taking care of myself. I mean, when you talk about like bottom up, I mean, I was so sabotaging myself. I like not making sure I ate right or slept well. And so another thing I learned over time with him was self-care, like on trips and just in general. I wasn't connected with the present moment and living in it. It's part of not taking care of yourself. You know, it's like just too easy to like check out.
Do you think that this is also part of being a profoundly gifted child with the intellectual overexcitability, that was what was everybody focused on? Right. So it's like they're prioritizing that. And so you're going to, especially in a default situation, right?
It's true, but like emotional is so strong for me. And so
but nobody was focused on that.
No, I mean, that seemed like it was something wrong with me.
Right.
Totally.
And it's not at all.
No,
it just needed to be cared for it. Like, imagine if somebody, like, okay, so if I could go back, what I want to do with your angry child self, I want to like play basketball and be like, oh yeah, tell me all the things you're mad about, and like dribble around. And I want them to tell me everything that they're mad about, and then be like, well, what else? And what else? And I want them to shout, well, and then this happened and then that happened. I'll be like, yeah, that's bullshit, right?
That's what I needed. Oh my God. That is so
I want to play
needed.
basketball with them and just let them like list angrily.
My therapist in high school, one of them, I mean, that was him. He would just sit there and like smile at me. And I would tell him, I'd be like, fuck you, man. Like, stop smiling at me. It's so great to think about like the caring people that I had in my life. And I was really blessed.
But imagine if there was some physical activity with it.
Oh, it would have been great if there was physical activity with it.
Like wrestling. You need someone to wrestle with you.
You can do that. If you want to take a part of yourself and have a conversation with them, there's no reason why you can't do that around an activity. Like
Yep.
my inner child desperately wanted to do finger painting, and so we did. And we had a conversation about things after she let out all her emotions, right? So you can do that, like with yourself. You can talk to, talk to your shadow beast, talk to your inner child, talk to your teenage self, talk to whatever aspect of you need to talk to, and do some form of activity with them while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Preferably one that they like.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I love. I love the activity part of it. Really letting that come into manifestation. I mean, it's one of the things that when I have somebody come in for body work, it seems like a very small thing that doesn't matter. But the first thing I do is I really want to get the sensory environment right for them. So it's like, oh, how's the light in here? And sometimes they'll come in and it's like they've been too busy. They're like, I don't know. So I just shelve it. And then as I can feel them kind of come back into their body 20 minutes later, it's like, oh, hey, like, do you like the curtains open or closed? And I have like a fountain in my room. Some people love the fountain. And I also play music. Or if they usually listen to SSP headphones. But it's like, I'll say, oh, like fountain on or off? Do you want essential oils? So it's like anything I can do to help. Because what's happening is it's this call and response with the body, right? Is I'm simply being like, oh, do you like this heat or not? And so being able to prioritize the body and then take action is a really simple way to care for somebody. So we can do that with ourselves, right?
These are important things to figure out. I do think that I was in my head so much for most of my life that it's like I was just on automatic pilot. I wasn't thinking about what my body needed or worrying about being grounded in it. But now I really appreciate my somatic experience and I appreciate the details of my environment, and it's nice.
Well, yeah, if you want to use like the boat metaphor, it's like, man, you get all your sails right and you just like catch that wind and you're gone, right? But you have to know what's happening.
You do.
But it's hard. I mean, it's like if you have a kid, with all these OEs and they're not in a super safe, stable environment, they're not going to stay in their body. That's just not how it works, right? I mean, that's the trauma response, right? That's what's really, again, a very intelligent adaptive strategy is to kind of check out and go on. So that's part of the rediscovery of self, to come back into the body. That's part of healing work.
Yeah, that's right. It's important.
I think that that's part of where there's a bit of risk as well. So if you are in a state of threat and you're removed from your body, when you have those moments that you are back in your body fully, they can actually become a little bit addictive. You've got a kid who's in permanent threat, and then all of a sudden you take them on a roller coaster that puts them like full on 100% in their body, and they go, wow, that was amazing. And I want to go back to that. And, whether it's thrill seeking or sex or drugs or whatever it is that's putting you back in your body, you do have a risk of getting addicted to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and that's all like sensory seeking behavior, right? Which is really common if you have a body that has a more dorsal tendency. As that body is starting to kind of move in, it will seek high sensory input. I'm a mountain biker, but I don't like riding uphill. I like downhill mountain bike parks, like crazy ones. I mean, I don't go down like the Blacks where you go down huge jumps or cliffs or anything. But I love rock climbing and skiing double black diamonds and riding my bike fast down hills. I love heavy sensory seeking. So you're right, Emma. It's important to understand that there's, I guess I'll call it danger. There's some danger elements in there. And I think that it's good to find ways that can help meet those needs. Like now I go to the gym to hit classes, like high intensity interval training, and that helps. If I can just like run fast and lift heavy weights, same thing, right? That's a healthier way for me to meet that request for my body now.
Right. Yeah. I need to do more. I've actually been kind of trying to decide what's next for me when it comes to physical activity. But one thing I'm really happy about is that I've gone for a walk every day for the past year. And it's been so nice to be outside every day, even in this first Wisconsin winter. It's been good.
Especially. Talk about like
Yeah.
a big, intense sensory environment. There's something so great about like bundling up and going outside and going for a walk in the cold.
It's true. So, I've
Yeah.
learned to appreciate it for the first time.
Yeah. And then you come back and it's like, maybe you have like a hot cup of coffee or tea and it's like, it feels so good.
Should probably wrap up, but it's been amazing.
So fun, you guys. Thank
It
you.
has. And hopefully we're all feeling, after this intellectual sort of stimulation and emotional stimulation and everything we've been through, hopefully our bodies are feeling okay and we're going to go take care of them.
We are.
Yes.
But yeah, I do. I feel so calm.
Yes. All my organs are so happy. And I have a really
Mine
big
too.
smile on my face.
We can't land on a better note
Same.
than my organs are happy, really. That's just...
I know. I'm not a weirdo at all, right? Is that what all your guests say when they leave? They're like, thank you. My organs are happy.
Now,
They might say it now. Yeah, I love it.
We're going to have to make that the standing final question now, Chris. Are your organs happy?
Yes.
Maybe not say it so creepy like that, but So, but thank you, Autumn. It's been great to learn about all this, and sometimes it's the things that you somehow instinctively kind of know, but you just need to put it's almost like positive disintegration. Once you wrap a framework and a language around it, it helps you take better control of things. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that
That's right.
this is a lot of intuitive things we've already known, right? Thank you both for having me, and thank you for this podcast. I listen to it all the time, and I've already learned so much from y'all in the last couple of years. So thanks for doing it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for joining us. I mean, I appreciate that you're a listener and a friend, and we're so happy that you joined us today.
And thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure.
It is always a pleasure.
And thank you to listeners. It's great to have you with us. Continue your path to authenticity through the links in the show notes. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter for stacks of cool things delivered straight to your inbox. Explore the Dabrowski Centre, email us, or join us on social media. And don't forget to show your love by liking, subscribing, grabbing some positive disintegration merch, or leaving us a rating or review on your podcast platform.